Hi, everybody. This is Kathy Murphy, the Pulpit Queen, and I'm channeling Tippi Hedren tonight as she was the star of Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds. And I think I've just done an outstanding job. As Robert, what did you say about my hair as I checked in?
Said it looks a bit like a bird's nest.
It is because these damn birds have been picking at my head ever since I started getting ready for this. And I actually I brought my birds, my lovebirds, and one of them got away. So I'm down to one bird and he's laying
Oh,
down. He's so sad. So I
oh,
brought my little birds and I've also brought some other things before we get started with our talk about one of the most iconic Alfred Hitchcock film, The Birds, is that I wanted to share with you years ago when I had my international Pulpo Queen girlfriend weekend. We had a happy birthday. I'm sorry, the birds got a little bit of a hair in my mouth, feathers too. But anyway, we had this birthday party, and we were supposed to come as our favorite Barbie. So I wanted to share with you all one of my iconic Barbies. Now I collect the weird ones. You know, I've got oh, what's his name? The California actor. He is oh, I'll just have to bring them on one night, show you all my weird Barbies. But they're usually weird ones like this, you know.
Like Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, kind of. I've got one of the stars of Alice in Wonderland and James
oh,
Franco. James Franco.
oh, I love
I've
him.
got James Franco Barbie, and I've got a couple other ones that are just amazing. And I've never took them out of the box because, see, this was in 1963, you all. Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, gave us a tale of terror, not soon. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to put on my readers. I wish I had some 1960 ones, but I'll have to do. Gave a tale of terror not soon forgotten, completely unsettling. The Birds is set in the bucolic seaside village of Bodega Bay along the California coast. One day, Melanie Daniels comes to call with a pair of lovebirds like I bought tonight. I brought my little lovebirds. That afternoon, one seagull attacks. Oh my gosh, it was terrible. Only the first in a series of ghastly escalating incidents, nature's revenge, apocalyptic fable, or simple horror movie, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds reveals some of the director's greatest images. This was the 45th anniversary doll of this particular one.
That's beautiful.
But it is a treasured, and people say, you've got to get rid of some of this stuff. There's just no way. I have a whole
Oh,
suitcase of blackbirds that I use for everything from Edgar Allan Poe readings to all of it.
yes.
And I want to mention this is going to be on our reading list this year as a bonus book. This is
Oh,
a book I discovered by Tippi. It's a memoir, and it really explains what happened with the whole fiasco with Alfred Hitchcock because he was obsessed with these blondes,
yeah.
Grace Kelly, all of these people, and what she went through. This was definitely before the Me Too, time that we're dealing with today. But anyway, we had this Barbie birthday party, and I went as Tippi Hedren. Everybody just immediately knew who I was because I had them going down my suit. I had a pea green suit and even pecking my legs. I mean, they were on my top of my shoes. I had hundreds of them. So next time you see the Halloween sale, buy up all the birds. It makes a great costume. And I will tell you that when I lived in California, my very first signed book was by, and I was looking for it. It was the Cats of Shambhala, and she signed it. It was my very. I didn't even know authors signed books. I went to a little. It was probably in just down the road from San Diego. It was probably, I don't know which one of those little seaside towns, but I went to a bookstore and she drew the little birds and signed it for me, and I was so excited because I've always had this thing for cats, being a cat. And then I even took a 2-week trip up Pacific Coast Highway and I went to Bodega Bay. I went to the schoolhouse. I took pictures. I wish I had them of, me on the jungle gym. Remember when it filled with all those
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
crows and, the seagulls were flying over. I was just like, I was back as a child sitting on my mother's divan in horror as poor Suzanne Plachette gets her eyes.
Suzanne Plachette. Oh my God.
Oh my God, she was my favorite. And the school teacher and she was trying to save the children and it was so sad. But everybody goes, "You're so strange, Kathy. That is not the most favorite film you should have of childhood." But it was for me. And so I've been watching it for years. I could probably quote some of the lines like Robert, but he's better at memorizing, and you probably are too, being an actor. But so tell me, Robert, first. Robert Gwaltney, everybody, is my co-host. And here he is in his Atlanta. I love the black lampshade. Did you bring that in for
Thank
tonight?
you. So I just shifted my position in the room.
Well, my gosh, I should have flew you over a bird. It would have gone so well with that lamp. But when was the first time you watched the birds?
So the first time I ever saw the birds, I was 10 years old. It was a Halloween night, and we had come in from trick-or-treating, and it was on television. And Mom let us stay up late to watch.
And it was black and white television?
No, it was color. I was able to see it in color.
I saw it in black and white, and that just even made it more ominous, because it was so creepy and scary. And then later on, when I read, some of these stories about her, if you go on YouTube, you can watch her tell interviews, all these stories about her. It's fascinating. How about this is Ruthie Landis, who's another one of her Pulp Queen authors, and she also has all this theater background. So I'm so glad you're here tonight because we want to hear about the first time you saw the film.
Well, I think so. My mom and dad, my dad was an actor and they were theater buffs. So oh my God, they watched everything and they loved horror films. Now, I can't say that I really loved horror films, but they loved them. So I had to watch them too. And it's interesting because I've probably seen it twice since I was a little girl when I saw it.
I watch it.
And then I saw it a third time because I watched it the other night. And my experience of it was so different because I think I had blocked out some of the things. I mean, I remember when she's in the phone booth.
Oh my
God, the phone booth.
And that weird woman in the gas station who was just, she was so severe. I mean, she stole the show because she was, she had gone into full panic mode and had the mother with the child just hunkering under the booth. I was just there. And if you ever get a chance to go there, of course, the schoolhouse was there. It's probably no longer there, but that gas station still is.
The gas station. And did you see that I sent you a picture of the truck, the green truck they drove? It reminded me the one in Jefferson, Texas, in front of the the general store. Very similar thing. But here's the thing: when you talk about the lady the mother with the two kids who gets hysterical. So fast forward all these years, and I'm watching it the other night, and I'm seeing it through such different eyes. So do you realize how ahead of his time he was? How he had that old oh God, I can't remember her name, character actress, and she was preaching about ecology.
Yes,
and she was.
This is nature getting back at us, and
we've ruined it. It's not the birds that are evil. We're evil. We're taking their thing away. I went, oh my goodness, how topical. And then that lady with her kid, I mean, he was so brilliant about plopping these things down in his plots. So you'd think that the movie was really about the birds, right? And terror. But what I came to see after this last viewing a couple of nights ago, was it wasn't. It was about a motherless child. Tippi Hedren was a motherless child, right? Her mother abandoned her.
And the relationship with her and this guy's mother.
I know.
It was fascinating.
And how he ends, isn't it?
Jessica Tandy.
Oh,
Jessica
God.
Tandy.
Jessica Tandy.
And how she was hysterical too, and her way of feeling abandoned when the father died, right, was that she was kind of hysterical but also controlling. And how Tippi Hedren was so I mean, she was so bird-like and so controlled and so every hair in place and everything. And she was just looking for a mother. And the
And the
other,
whole town thinks it all happened when you came to town, you know?
that's
And
right.
feeling about, you know, if you've ever been a new person that's come to town and you're a little bit different. I mean, she was a classy lady. I mean, there's no way, you know, this Kansas girl can emulate Tippi, but I've always adored her, and she always did everything. And her upbringing is very, you know, if you read this book, her background is very, you know, it's not, she wasn't raised privileged or anything, but she just had a incredible sense. And she started out as a model. She didn't even, you know, this wasn't even in her radar, but she is still beautiful. I mean, she's still beautiful. I I had a book and film club where I featured Candy Clark some time ago, and Candy Clark, the actress that was up for the Oscar in American Graffiti, and she knows her, and she says she's just lovely, but so is Candy Clark. But I just, that was the Hollywood that I loved, you know, where everything was, you know, like Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant. I mean, everybody was, they were just, it was just, you know, you felt like they were just iconic and glamorous and everything that I wanted to be. And, you know, I never really, everybody talked about how wonderfully good looking that guy was. He just made me nervous because he was all,
Rod Taylor.
yes, he was just
Yeah, I thought he was
like
really.
his
I
mother all
always
the
thought he was
time. And
really
I just,
handsome.
and
But
driving that
it's
car.
interesting. You have all of these women though that really sort of revolve around Rod Taylor. You know, you have his sister Kathy and his mother. You have Melanie, and then you have the old girlfriend that's played by Suzanne Plachette.
Love her. I love her. I thought she was perfect because she, you know, she wants to hate this woman who shows up in the cigarette scene. I mean, just all those things are just so funny to me now because, you know, I just read today that they're doing away with menthol cigarettes. There will be no more. They're not going to have them. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, now menthol cigarettes are going to go black market. My grandma smoked menthol cools, you know, so I'm just going, wow, my grandma would have really been distressed. But
Well, you know, the movie actually was loosely based on Daphne du Maurier's novel
That's
of the
right.
same title. I think her novel from 1952.
Yeah.
And what was really cool, I thought about how particular Alfred Hitchcock was about costuming. You know, I think Edith Head was the costume designer, and
they,
he had this vision of wanting to have a lot of green and throughout, and he wanted Melanie Daniels to be in green, which would make her stand out and apart from the other citizens of Bodega Bay.
Right.
Um,
And she wore
but
the same suit, didn't she? She wore,
well,
she
so
never
she had three
Tiger.
costumes.
Did she have three?
Three costumes. Yeah.
the nightgown.
So there's that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's the opening scenes when she's buying the bird. She's in a simple. She's wearing black pumps and a white jacket. She wears the green crepe wool suit, which is sort of Chanel in design,
Very box.
and then the general store nightgown.
Right, the nightgown.
That was, yeah, that was
Brilliant.
kind of grandma looking.
But you know what was really cool is when she meets Susan Plachette for the first time, they're both wearing green. Suzanne Plachette's just wearing a much darker shade of green.
Yeah, because they were trying to make her like she was the bad character. You know,
Yeah.
isn't it funny? And she was the school teacher. She was saving the children. She was, and you know, but she was still obviously carrying, you know, the torch for, you
For
know,
Dreamy Rod Taylor.
yeah. And there just wasn't a love connection there. But the chemistry between them when they meet in the pet store, you know, and but I've always been an animal lover, and I had a pet sparrow named Dot. and I let it go and let it fly away. But I found it fell out of its nest, and I put it in a little. I have, you guys, I have these brass bird cages all over my house. I mean, I do, and this is my little one. But I've always been fascinated with birds. I don't keep them in cages, of course. I like to watch them fly free. But my favorite bird has always been the black ravens, the crows, the blackbirds, and I think that's because of that movie. The gulls didn't, though. I've had a few run-ins with gulls when I lived in San Diego. They get very aggressive, by the way.
They were pecking away at his hands when he was pushing them. They're eating through the wood, and then they kept getting his hand. I'm going like, just get it out of there. What? Oh my.
I love it. And I'm not a horror fan movie, but that movie, the only other movie that I'm really crazy about like that, and it's a newer movie, it was done during, I think, the 80s, was Jamie Lee Curtis was in Halloween, the original Halloween. And when she's sitting on the couch and that guy pops up with that knitting needle, I think the scariest movies are the ones where you're like Psycho, where you're anticipating it, but gore and all that stuff, but
Psycho was amazing.
being packed, in that room. And really what happened, they were going to have mechanical birds in that scene. And that's what they swooped through with mechanical birds in those outdoor scenes. They had trained birds too. But when she went to go into that room, they had trained the birds to peck, and they put her in there and they were pecking her.
I mean, really? Is it true? Is it true?
Yeah, they were really pecking her. It's all in this book, and she got out of there. Now, it wasn't. She wasn't
at the end of her nervous breakdown. Yeah,
she pretty much was
catatonic
when she came out of that scene. But I'm going to watch it again tonight. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I decided that I would wait and watch it tonight and see where I relate to it now, because the Rod Taylor and the Tippy and I think I'm probably more the age of Jessica Tandy now, the mother of him, and little Kathy, wasn't she precious? And
one of the Cartwright girls.
And she wanted to save the lovebirds, and then when they backed out of the driveway, do you remember? And
that's a wonderful shot.
It's
what?
The best. I think the best shot, because it's really like, is this the end of the world? And you just have to leave it to your imagination.
You don't know. But what you do know is that there is this closure between Tippi Hedren and Jessica Tandy. And that was such a surprising moment for me. I was like, oh, this is what this movie is really about in terms of the story, right? It's beyond the birds. It's that the birds actually brought these two ladies together.
It's really about the bigger picture, what's happening in the world. And it's as relevant today as it is, there's been cases of places where all of a sudden the birds are attacking people. I mean, I used to go to my sister's house, and they have this particular bird there that gets in the holly trees, and they mockingbird, they swoop down and they try to peck you. And it's just like, I felt like a scene from The Birds. Their mockingbirds are very aggressive. But the one thing about this movie was, and all of the Alfred Hitchcock films, is that he was a master of creating the buildup. It's really not the fear that he created on the screen, it's in your own mind.
Yeah. And the way that he built tension.
I was in New York for sales conference when I was a book sales rep, and the Met was having an Alfred Hitchcock exhibition, and you could go in and watch his films, and they were doing all this. And this has been some time ago, so it was right about the time that it was coming out about what happened to all these girls that were in his films. He would stare, and he made them so uncomfortable. It was hard for them to be, sorry, these little hairs, dang it, birds. They're getting in my eyes and my nose. But anyway, he made them so uncomfortable, Grace Kelly had gone on to marry, the Prince of Morocco, and when he was trying to get her to do Marnie. I think Marnie was the next film, and she said, as far as the actors in the film, everybody was wonderful. And she was with, she talked about Sean Connery and what a gentleman it was. And I've heard lots of stories about Sean Connery through the years, but she said he basically kept the stars separated from everybody in the film because he didn't want them to have any kind of relationship. But she said everybody was really professional and sweet to work with except for him. And his wife knew what he was like.
Did you see the movie Hitchcock that was done not long ago?
Uh-huh. And
I think it was with Anthony Hopkins, wasn't it?
Who was the character that played Alma, his wife?
His wife was
I'll have to look.
oh my God, she's really famous. Oh, I can't remember. But Anthony Hopkins played him, and it was
Anthony Hopkins can do anybody. He's like Meryl Streep. He can just take on a role and he becomes that role. I mean, he just won the Academy Award so for The Father. But I do think that when you were 10, were you as scared as did it really frighten you?
Yeah, well, so there were extremely tense moments in the film. I remember the playground when when the kids are singing Rizzledy Rozzledy, and it's slowly building the tension, and the birds are slowly starting to collect and gather. I thought that was really frightening. And those scenes when the children were running, and you had that with the one little girl that fell down, and then the bird is on her shoulder. The scene in the telephone booth
that
was really frightening.
Terrific.
I remember being just not so much terrified as I think just disturbed. And to me, I've always been more frightened when things seem perhaps that they could really happen, and the birds, really isn't all that terribly far fetched.
No.
And if you've ever lived in houses like I have that are all glass, you'll be sitting doing something, and every once in a while a bird will just hit it, and
Yep.
Well, they don't see that they think they're flying in through. They don't see that there's glass, and so that's why you try to put stickers or something up. But yeah, But I've always we have down the road from Jefferson, where I used to live, we had a guy that I knew had a farm, and LSU used to come over, and they had it's ornithologist, who study bird migrations. They had a professor who would come, and once a month he'd set up about 15 nets, and they're very fine, almost like a hairnet, and they'd stretch them across, and they capture low flying birds to study their migration patterns. And I went out, and the first thing I noticed was nobody wanted to get the red birds, the cardinals, out of the net. And I was asking, some of the guys that I knew out there, I go, why don't they get them out? And they said, because they bite, and they literally break your skin. And he said, but what you do is you go to the net and you have a little twig, and you put the twig in front of it, and the bird bites down on the twig, and he won't let go. So then you go in with your fingers, and you get his little feet, and his feet go between your fingers, and then you just got him right there, and you carry him over to the bird banding table, and they put him in a sock, like a tube sock, and then they weigh them. They know how much the sock weighs, and they weigh them in these big prescription. They put them upside down in these prescription, like my diabetic medicine, like a big one like this, and they weigh it, and then they mark down all those things. They check it for mites and if it has any disease or anything, and then they band its little foot, and then they let it go. They're not hurt in any form or fashion, but they've been able to study the migration of all these the smaller birds, like the wrens. I think the biggest bird we ever caught is we got some kind of hawk, flew down, and they normally don't fly that low, but it saw a snake, and it got a snake in its talons, and the snake and the bird got caught in the net. And I go, well, who's going to get that one out? I'm not. I'm not going anywhere. But I used to take my Girl Scouts out, my youth group out to watch them ban the birds. It was fascinating. And I became known as the person that would, you know, get the red birds out because and they're so cute. They're so cute. And I just love the little birds. So but
So,
wouldn't want
I
to put them in a cage or anything, but
well, I want to just say that there's some interesting stuff about what you're saying about things that not being so far fetched because of, global weirding, not warming, but weirding. It is changing the migration. So, like, I live in the city in Chicago in a little neighborhood, and I do have trees and I have hawks. And today I was walking a client, we were doing a walking session, and right there was a little baby hawk. I mean, it wasn't like its mom and dad that I'd seen it, but maybe about this big wide span, and I think when they come to you, they have a message to tell you. So the hawk medicine is about your perception and about seeing things clearly, because the hawkeye, they could see something and go down. So I thought, oh, this is about perception. But even that there would be hawks in our neighborhood is so odd. And then the other thing that happened yesterday was, we do have geese, but they shouldn't be here to the degree that they are. And honestly, like that little book where the mom and dad and their little goslings follow them, the children's book.
oh, make way for ducklings.
Yes, make room for ducklings. Well, guess what? Right on my sidewalk, I posted it on Facebook today. A mommy and a daddy and little goslings walking across the street, them all following just like that book, walking on our city sidewalks. I mean, we live in an area where the houses are right on top of it. It was scary. It's like, this isn't safe for you guys to be here. It's not safe. But there's changes, like, so I'm sure that when you were doing what you were doing, the migration patterns were a certain way, but I think there's change happening for sure.
You used to see the Canadian geese go over and you'd hear them honking before you saw them,
Yeah.
I haven't seen them yet, but I've seen some kind of white bird. It's snow white. It's some kind of egret that they've been flying over going back south. But here's the weirdest thing that I've had happen since I moved to this location in East Texas. I was going back and forth to school every day. And for some reason, I got home early one day. A class was canceled or we weren't going to have it or something. And I got home in the afternoon. And when I pulled into my drive, I live in the woods. I looked on the porch and there was a vulture. And the vulture was about 3 feet high. He's about 30 inches, 30. He was big. And he was just standing. It's on my side porch. He was standing and just looking at the door. And I just sat in the car and go, is there something dead in my house? What's going on? And so I took some pictures of it because I was going, a vulture is on my porch. And so when I got out of the car, it flew off. And so I just was kind of watching, and I'd come home and it'd be on my roof. And I go, man, I'm starting to get the heebie jeebies because, a vulture. Well, then I came home one day or one Saturday and I heard some noise, and that vulture was on my back deck with two baby vultures.
Oh.
And it was teaching the vultures how to fly. And I found out in my front woods at the top of this pine tree, like 50 feet up, was this huge vulture nest. And I thought, how many people get a vulture living on their property? So as I would, I don't go in the side porch. I usually walk down the back. The back of my house is actually like the front because it's all glass and faces the woods. So I walk down it and I come in that way. And I'd walk by the vultures and I'd look at them and they just look at me and watch me walk by. And I named them He and Ha. Okay. So so then I started posting daily photos on He and Haw and their progress, and I'm seeing them fly. But I'm thinking, how did they get back up to that nest every night? I couldn't figure. I never saw them go. And so one day they were gone, and I was going down the road, and there was a deer on the side of the road dead, and there were about 30, 40 vultures around it. And when I drove by in my car, two little young heads popped up and looked and watched, and I swear it was them. I swear they were at that kill site, and I saw them, I think, one more time, and then I've never seen them since. But vultures, can you imagine? But I was kind of reading up on them, and actually, what do you know about a vulture? The cartoons where they always loomed,
Well, I think as if you think of bird medicine, like if they appear, why did they appear? So it has to do with scavenging, and
Yeah.
it has to look like cleaning up messes. It's like they don't often attack and kill.
Yeah.
They come and they're the garbage cleaners.
They are actually nature's garbage disposals. They don't eat anything unless it's dead or dying.
That's right, which is
And
really
so really clean up the highways and everything. So I break for vultures. I'm the strangest person in the world. If I see a vulture in the road, I break because I think, oh my God, it could be he or haw. They were there for a month, every day. And people go, Kathy, that's strange. You've got two vultures living on your back deck. But I've had stranger things happen. But the thing about the birds it didn't scare me, it fascinated me. I wanted to know more about why the birds were doing this. And I also wanted to know why they were attacking the human beings, because the people they were attacking weren't doing anything wrong. But it was just like, but they say that if all the birds got together in the world, they so far outnumber us, we're doomed.
Yeah, it's true.
But
Yeah. So I'm interested. Why do you think because he was so impeccable about color, like Robert said, about everything in his set. I mean, when I was, studying in the film school, we would watch every one of his movies and break it apart like you would a book in an English class. And I'm interested in why you guys think he just chose to have blackbirds and seagulls only.
Well, because I think black and white, good and evil. You know, I you know back in the '60s, it's kind of the way there's the good guys and the bad guys, and then I think it also he was showing how when people get in a situation where, say, you have COVID, or remember when we had to, they had the drills for the, if the bomb dropped, you'd have to get under your desk and curl up. I mean, like, that would do any good.
Because that'll help.
Well, and then with the pandemic, the bird flu that was going around for a while.
Yeah,
oh my God, they could be carriers, not just like chickens, but
all this stuff. I think when the earth gets out of balance one way or another, these things are just nature's way of balancing out. It doesn't look at who's bad or who's good. It's just a cleansing. And I know that sounds terrible, but I really think we've overpopulated the world, and I think it's depopulizing, and people now aren't having as many children. So then we have more. I just think it's nature saying, hey, humans, we all think the world revolves around us, but I'm going to tell you, I live in this forest of trees, and this is very woo-woo, but I swear these trees are watching out for me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I never worry about a tree falling on my house. People go, the trees are so close to your house. And I go, since I've lived in Texas, I've always lived in the woods. And I said, I feel like, and now they're learning all this communication between.
I know, underneath the fungus.
And how they communicate, and how if one of them falls, they all, in a sense, mourn. Kind of like, remember when they found out about the elephants, how the
Yep.
elephants mourn their.
Would make a circle around. Yep.
I think we do not give the animal kingdom or the plant kingdom or the proper respect of. They think, well, they're not as intelligent as us. I think they have a different type of intelligence.
Oh, they're definitely conscious.
I can
Absolutely.
tell you that if you put me and a tiger out here, I'm going to tell you who's going to win. It's not going to be me. It's going to be the tiger. And
But you know, I just say about that tree thing. I listened to this amazing podcast, and it was a scientist who was studying about what the trees do, not only the morning, but so this is really important. So let's say you're in a clearing of trees. The healthy trees, no matter what their species, if they detect a sickly tree that isn't the same species, right? They will send nutrients through the ground to help that sickly tree, again, not the same species. Now, here we are living in a world
yeah, it's true.
with so much prejudice, and and there are the trees going, it's another tree, I'm just going to help it.
It's like I accidentally tapped into, I was on YouTube. I like to watch TED Talks and different things. And they had this thing on, have you heard the latest on India? And I'm fascinated with it. So I thought, oh, watch it. I am horrified what's happening. They lost nearly 4,000 people yesterday in one day. And the bodies are stacking up so fast, the crematoriums don't have the wood to burn. So what they've done is the empty parking lots next to the crematorium, people are just taking their family members and bringing their own wood and cremating them themselves. And some people leave the bodies because they can't get any wood, and they just leave them in this parking lot. And they don't have any oxygen is the big problem. They don't have any oxygen and they don't have any ventilators. And so these people, but there were literally outside 4 or 5 hospitals, they showed people laying, a woman was laying on the ground with her son and her husband, and she couldn't stand up. She was so sick. And they said, why did you take her out of the car? And he goes, I'm trying to save my mother's life. She can't breathe. And they have no room, no room. And so I think we're sending vaccines, we're sending oxygen, but I think if the world would put as much emphasis on these situations rather than sending in people to stop wars, I mean, just helping good people that are, I just can't imagine. And I remember when the hurricane hit New Orleans, my brother-in-law was sent down there. He worked for this insurance company that did the adjusting. And people in this hospital, they just abandoned, all the help went home, and they left all the elderly in their beds. And I mean, they couldn't get up. And so they just, everybody left them. I just think, where's the humanity? And I think that's what this film is about. It's about all these things that are scary are really, I think, in a lot of ways, human. Um, is it the word induce? Human, because like when I think of Rear Window, or I think of, what's the one we were talking about, Robert, with Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart? Was that? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, Rear Window.
Yeah, Rear Window, where they're sitting and he's in the wheelchair and they're watching the man across the way, and they're pretty sure he did his wife in. And I'm telling you, I was on the edge of the seat with that movie, but not in a bad way, just fascinated by, kind of like watching an ambulance or, go to a
Right.
fire, or you're driving by a wreck. There's something about humans that have to see it, and so I think that he tapped into that. But he was kind of he was kind of in a different, like almost savant, the way he did the film stuff. I mean, he was very focused, but he was also kind of a pervert too at the same time. I hate
Well,
to
he
say
was. I think that's why he was using his own darkness. I mean, Stephen King talks about this too. He says he has to write those books so that he won't be so afraid. Like he writes books that make him that are worse than anything he could imagine happening to him, and it calms him down. Stephen King said that in an interview. And so with Alfred Hitchcock, I think, I mean, in the movie Hitchcock, it isn't just about being a pervert. I mean, I think he was, a homely man, an ugly man.
he was
And
married, he had a wife, and she was.
I I know, but I think
He was a
that
man of obsessions, you know,
yeah,
That's
and it certainly showed in the way that he approached filmmaking down to every level of detail. Certainly
every,
fascinated with blondes. Um, he loved sort of that there was a what he admired, I think, in the women was this, and what he wanted to portray was this chasteness that,
yeah.
yeah, very much so. And of
and,
course,
and think of it in the birds. I mean, think of that. I mean, they never overplay a scene. He always has it understated. Nobody's over the top until they're pegging their eyes out. But they kind of like are nonchalant about it and almost innocent, and like, why wouldn't, like, they be calling in scientists, and there's a naivete about it. And I think that he kind of, because he was a bit of a predator himself.
that's a
Now,
that's a good word, predator, because he was like a bird of prey. He was, and she was the little dove.
mhm.
Um, it was really eerie. And she
you
had
know,
a
I,
child when this was all going on too. She had her daughter Melanie was only like about 4 or 5, I think, when this movie was being filmed, and so she always used her daughter as an excuse. She had to get home because her daughter, she had to be with her daughter. But he was always trying to get her to go out to dinner with him and have drinks. And I was just like, ooh, that's
It
so
is, it is very similar in a way to the, what's his name, Ailes,
Ailes.
Fox News guy that got caught, the movie that with the three blondes, um,
Oh yeah, the one that we
Charlene,
that was a great movie. Did you see that? I
yes,
watched that. What was the name of that movie? You
it
should,
was,
Robert always remembers. It was
um,
Charlize Theron. It
yeah,
was
yes,
um,
I've gone blank.
and they were all
Um,
blonde, just the same way. And what is it? Robert Ailes, Richard Ailes. He was creepy and ugly and kind of similar type.
but it's just the the classic scenario that if a man gets in a position of power, he feels like he has, and it happens to women sometimes too. They get in a position where they feel like they can get away with anything because we've seen this a lot in the past few years. So,
Oh
um,
yes.
but anyway, I I I think about it when I was a child, and I haven't seen it. I think I watched it when I first moved here about 8 years ago because I went through all my movie collection. I watched like 500 movies because I had never, when I moved here, I never lived by myself for 25 years. My house was like Grand Central Station, and every night I go, what do I do? There's nobody, my kids were gone, they were in college. I was just so I watched every movie. I've watched all my 1930s movies. I still haven't found that movie, Robert, about maybe you'll know, Ruthie. It's I believe it's in 1930s, and I want to say Irene Dunn may have played the woman, maybe not. But she plays a socialite that she's at a big ball and they have a scavenger hunt. And she goes down to, and they said, bring in a homeless man. And so that was one of the things on the scavenger hunt. Now, how politically incorrect is that? And
Yeah.
so she brings in this guy and ends up, it's kind of an interesting story, but she falls in love, it's typical. And he's not what he seems. So there was another stereotype that broke the stereotype, and
Like a Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. Where
it was a great film, and they had great charisma with each other. The guy who played um, the role, and I can't think of his name, but he was a very famous actor of that era. So I pulled up the top 50 films in the 1930s, and it wasn't in there. I could not find it. I'll find it eventually. But I do like watching the older movies, the black and white movies, and I do think it's cool now that they've come back with La La Land and the artist and some of those where they've done in the. I love those. It doesn't bother me. My kids go, "Why would you want to watch a gray movie?" And I go, "Gray," and they go, "Well, they're really not black and white. They're shades of gray." I go, "Oh, well, I never really thought about that. We just always call them black and
I
white."
found your I just found your film. I think it's titled My Man Godfrey, starring Carol Lombard.
well, Carol Lombard.
I'll have to check that out. If that's it,
I think it's Carol Lombard. She was wonderful.
we will have to watch that
Fifth,
film. We will have to watch that.
Fifth Avenue socialite Irene Bullock, played by Carol Lombard, needs a forgotten man to win a scavenger hunt.
That's it.
And no one
My Man
more
Godfrey.
forgotten than Godfrey Park.
What year
He's
was
played by William Powell.
Yes, and what year was that?
1936.
We should do that next week. Let me
I
see if
think
we can find it first. Let's see,
We have to see
because
if
that
we
is
can.
the an interesting story. And the 30s, what I liked about Michelle Cox was on our Breathless Bubbles and Books all this week, the author, and her Henrietta and Inspector Howard series is set in Chicago during the 1930s. And it reminds me of the Thin Man, you know how, and the little dog. And I said, she asked the question of everybody, what era, if you could be in any era, would you want to go back in time to? And I go, the 1930s, because I thought men and women were snazzy. You know, the men wore the fedoras, they dressed, when they went out, they wore tuxedos. I I got gypped. I was raised in the 70s, man. And, I can remember going on a blind date with a guy that had on a slinky shirt. Remember those slinky, shiny shirts he had high waisted super bells on with platforms. And he had,
Oh yeah,
and he
great
had,
shirts.
he was a white guy, but he had an
Jelly. They were like jelly, the shirts. I call them jelly shirts.
it was really, I don't know, purples and.
Well, I think I totally agree with you. So, like Turner Classics and stuff like that, you can sometimes find it. Like I was a Betty Davis. I love Betty Davis. Oh my God. I walked down the aisle at my wedding to the theme song of Now Voyager.
You did not. That's
I
a
love
great
Now
film.
Voyager. It's a
Now
favorite.
Voyager. We're gonna have to do that one.
Oh, Now Voyager. And what was the one where she was blind? That she goes blind. Do you remember that? Where she's
Dark Obsession?
Dark Victories. Dark
Victories. But we just did we do All About Eve?
We did. No, we've not done All About Eve,
Maybe
but
we're
we
talking about it. Or maybe I just watched it. But she was one of my favorite actresses. And she started out as a blonde bombshell. She had very much the Carol Lombard, hair, and then she changed it. And, that happened a lot. And then when they changed their hair is when they became famous. Everybody started out blonde. Lucille Ball. I'm just trying to think of some other ones that changed their hair.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little goosebumps. I met her.
Who?
Betty Davis.
Oh, man.
And I'll take a picture of it for you in the attic. So my dad, who was an actor too, he was doing a summer stock thing, and he wasn't in the play with her, but he was in the play following her. So I got to go to some of those rehearsals and the performance. We have a huge, it's like 10 feet by 8 feet picture of her from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and she signed it to us. She signed it.
No.
I have it in my attic. I'm going to send you a picture of it.
I gotta see pictures of her attic. I have a pet a portrait of her that was done in pastels. I bought in a boutique, and it was in the bathroom. And I said, "Where'd you get that, Betty Davis?" She goes, "Oh, uh, everything that we have that's art in the store, not the clothes or anything, is 75% off." And I bought that sucker. And it actually, I think it was done by an artist in Chicago. How it got down to Texas, I don't know, but I have it. Should I show it to you? Should I show it to you?
Yes,
It's right here around the corner. Okay.
yes.
Keep talking.
She was amazing. She was really old when I met her. But she was, I mean, she was a consummate professional, you know, like no nonsense and everything, but she was, what was the movie just out that, I mean,
Feud.
wasn't there a series
Yeah,
where
it was called
Betty Davis and where they were enemies, Betty
Yeah,
Davis
it
and
was
Joan Crawford?
Look
the
at this.
Ryan Murphy series Feud.
Isn't it fabulous?
Huge.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, that's fabulous.
It was done by an artist. His name is R. Gillum. Get this, 262 South 21st Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Oh, Philadelphia.
And I got it. And it was in the bathroom in this boutique. And I just, it's
Those eyes. It was her eyes. It was her eyes. And you know the thing about her is, if you look at all the movies she's done where there's tragedy and everything, you know, as when I was a young acting student, I just was so taken how she never cried, but she made the audience cry.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? You didn't see her like we see in the modern films now, where everybody's crying all the time in the films. She had this thing where her eyes would get liquid, you know, like those enormous eyes, but she would never cry. She never cried. And you'd sit there and cry for her, you know, cry for her.
I think she's probably one of the most, she was always vilified, you know, she was always made, but she was just, she knew what she wanted to do. And even her own daughter, she had, you know, and a lot of, you know, Debbie Reynolds. I mean, there's a lot of actors, you know, whose daughters, Joan Crawford, I mean, Loretta Young, all these people that they would have these children, and they had a hard time with it, you know. It was hard for them to understand when everybody else's mothers were stay at home, and then they were always gone and working or on the studio. And even Tippy talks about the wonderful relationship she has with her daughter.
Yeah, but look at Melanie. She was messed up, you know.
Yeah.
She's been in rehab in so many times.
She has, and I didn't realize she'd married Don Johnson twice. You know, he's a Kansas boy. It just cracks me up, the connections. But gosh, what a class act. I mean,
Oh, I know.
isn't that the coolest picture ever?
I know.
That's great.
But I love the stories behind the stories, and Robert's always really good. Any other little tidbits you want to share, Robert?
Yes. Well, so one of the things I find most fascinating about the Birds is that there's no musical score.
That's right.
There's
Oh,
no
my
They
music.
wanted you to hear the birds. They wanted you to hear the song. I mean, the birds, the
Yeah,
sound of the
there's
birds.
absolutely no music. So
No.
you know that scene when Jessica Tandy goes into the to the home to check on a friend, you know, and she's horrified, and she said, "There's no music. It's just sound and her retching." So when you watch it again, pay attention.
I never realized that.
There's no musical score, which really ramps up the tension.
Wow.
Because all his other movies, he does have a musical
Yeah.
score, very much so. That's, you know,
that ominous. But I completely forgotten that. And you know, I just watched The Sound of Metal, which was
well, wasn't that powerful? Oh my God.
Robert and I wanted him to win the best actor, but I know that Anthony Hopkins, and if you haven't seen his blogs that he posts, I share every one of them I ever see. They are the most beautiful, touching posts. And how old is he? Isn't he like,
Who, Anthony Hopkins?
he's the oldest actor to win?
I know, he's in his late, you know, mid to late 80s. He's in his 80s.
Are you sure he's 90? He's
I
not.
don't think he turned 90 yet, did he?
Let's see.
Let's see. I always look this up too.
But he has this cat, and he
He's
plays.
83.
He's 83.
Oh well, no, he's not even close. So
He's a spring chicken.
he's a spring chicken. 83 is nothing today. I mean, look at George Burns. He lived to be. Look at Betty White. We got.
Oh, that Betty White. I just love her.
I love her, and we just lost Olympia Dukakis.
I know, and
Which
she was so great.
I watched her in the film set in San Francisco that it was written by the San Francisco Chronicles entertainment guy. He was from South Carolina, and they did a remake of it recently on Netflix, and they showed the original that was in the 70s. Oh my gosh. And it stars Laura Linney, plays the character.
She must have been really young.
Yeah. And then they did the remake, and she's back, and all the characters, Olivia Dukakis, all the characters.
The Armistead Maupin series.
Yes,
Tales from the City.
Tales from the City. Okay. I just watched Olivia Dukakis in that, and that the remake, and then I went back and watched the first one. And you want to know, here's a story for all of you out there in Filmland, is that Armistead wrote that story based on my friend and author Pat Montadon, who lives in Beverly Hills. She at one time had her own television show in San Francisco, and she became the darling of the jet set. She dated Frank Sinatra and all this stuff. In fact, her recipes for a conversation is going to be on our reading list for this year, and I'm going to see if I can get Pat to since it's virtual, to come on board. But that Laura Linney character was based upon her, because she was from a little town in Oklahoma, and she ran away when she was 15, and she became a model at Neiman Marcus. Her uncle took her to Neiman Marcus, and she walked in. They immediately made her a model. And her parents were both ministers of that kind of off the brand set. I don't know what Church of God or whatever they were, Church of Cross or whatever they were with, but they went and got her. And then she always married millionaires, and she married the Butter King of San Francisco, of California, and then she divorced him. And a couple Octobers ago, I was just at her home in Beverly Hills, but that Laura Linney character was based upon her, and I never knew that. And I did not see the first one, Tales of the City, in the 70s, because I was in Kansas. We didn't get anything on time. We were always way behind, but now, the world is flat and we have the internet. It doesn't matter where you live, you can see everything. And but just the fact that this little Kansas girl goes to California. I worked for Elizabeth Arden as a makeup artist, and my first book was signed by Tippi Hedren. Now, what are the chances that something like that would happen? And she drew the little birds in it, just like in the inside cover of this book. See, it has those little birds.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I didn't know about this book, and somebody told me about it, so I ordered it. And I know it's an older book, but it's absolutely.
Kathy, have you seen the film The Girl, which is about Tippi Hedren?
No.
Yeah, it came out a few years ago, and it's fascinating about her relationship with Alfred Hitchcock.
Now, wait a minute. I may have. Who played Alfred Hitchcock?
Oh my goodness. Let's see. I can tell you quickly the cast.
Oh, good. Because I've got to watch that. What happens with me when I watch one film, then I don't know how long it's been since I've seen Marnie. Now I want to go watch Marnie.
Marnie.
So that people watching these there's nobody besides TCM. There's nobody really doing film clubs. So I thought, I'm a big film buff. I go, well, I think the first day I put up, I was going to start this, the first 10 minutes, 50 people signed on board. And what they're doing is they're not really participating in this, but then they go and watch the film.
Yeah.
So that's okay. Most of the best films in the world are based upon books. So that's, or screenplays that are the written word. So I'm cool with it. I just want people to understand the power of the story, whether it be a screenplay, whether it be a book, whether it be a
So
song.
many based, like when you said Daphne du Maurier was, was what this was loosely based on. I mean, she had a lot of films they made from her because
Rebecca.
her Rebecca, right? I
Right.
mean, that's some of the best films.
Who was the guy who played it? Did you find it?
Laurence
Yes.
Olivier
So,
was.
so the girl came out in 2012. Tippi Hedren was portrayed by Sienna Miller, and Toby Jones played Alfred Hitchcock.
Toby Jones.
Yeah.
Oh, didn't he play
Truman Capote.
Capote?
Mhm.
Okay, that is those those two films that came out. One was starred the actor.
Oh, that's right.
He passed. Philip.
Seymour
Seymour
Hoffman.
Philip Hoffman. Yeah, Philip
Both
And
of
Seymour
those
Hoffman.
films were so good. And my favorite book of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird. And right now, the Turner Classic Movies is having a film festival. And I noticed they're showing all my favorite films, and I got to figure out how I can watch them. I don't know how you do it because I don't have television anymore. I just have Netflix, Hulu. But they're doing To Kill a Mockingbird. They're doing Fried Green Tomatoes, you all, 30 years, 30th anniversary. And Fannie Flagg's a friend of mine. She's a pulpwood queen. I did a whole television show with her in Beverly Hills, and you can watch it, Ruthie. You guys can watch it. Go to YouTube and type in Beauty in the Book show with Fannie Flagg, and you'll have to see how much thinner I am now because I've been pulling up all these old pictures and I go, man, I have lost weight. I don't know how big I am, but we did this show out there and we went to Beverly Hills shopping. I've never had so much fun in my life. Fannie Flagg is fun. And I would love, we're picking one of her books for this year as she's on our list, but she doesn't do email, social media at all. She's dyslexic. And so I have her mailing address somewhere here, but I'm going to see if I can get a hold of her. I have a friend that knows her she's from Birmingham, and I want to see if I can get her to come back to Girlfriend Weekend because she is, when we had her come, Ruthie, and I want to bring it back when we have our next live meeting. We had a author book club talent show, and you had to register to do it. And we had authors get up, and some of them just blew me away. Like last year at Girlfriend Weekend, we had David Valdez, who's a playwright in New York, and but he'd written this book that I just loved. And he said, I'm going to play the piano. I go, oh, you play the piano? Okay. He got up and played the piano on stage, and we were just like blown away. But Fannie Flagg did, get this, bird whistles, bird calls. She did, and she had them down, man. We were laughing so hard, and she wore the craziest outfit. She's like me. She likes to dress for the part. She had a little pointy hat and a sweater that had zigzags on it like Charlie Brown, and green knickers. Knickers? Who wears knickers? You know what? With stockings and funny shoes. And she'd do all these birds. And we were on the floor laughing. And we put on a play called the Pretty Princess Pulpwood Queen pageant, where all the pageant contestants were played by the men authors. And I got, I'll never forget, Neil White, when he went up on the stage, he had on this very slim, tight black dress with pantyhose and low heels. And he went up the steps and he tripped. And he fell full out with the wig, on the floor. He just jumped up, the knees all torn out and bleeding, and he just kept on going. The show goes on, and Sam Bracken played a pageant contestant, and Sam Bracken was the one of the leading fullbacks for Georgia Tech. He's 6 foot. 6 foot. He couldn't find shoes to fit him, so he had to wear like these slides from the dollar store with his sequin dress up. But we need to bring it back because I don't think any of us laughed more that night than because we show us your hidden talents, and we just had people sign up, and you just didn't know what people were going to do. It was so much fun. And, you know, that's for people who are listening out there. We go down many rabbit holes. We are a book club, the International Pulpit Queens and Timber Guys Book Club. But if it isn't fun, we're not going to do it. We're not your mama's book club. This isn't homework. We're not trying to do literary critique. We're just wanting to be entertained, educated, enlightened, like your books. Your books are so enlightening. We want our lives to be richer because we're readers. So whether you're reading the screenplay or the songwriter or in fact, I just got Dolly Parton's new story and lyrics, fabulous book. It's going to be on our bonus book club selection. But I've got a bunch of celebrities I'm putting, because of the book and film club, I've got Michael J. Fox's new book in it. It's incredible. I've got Matthew McConaughey's new book, Green Lights. I've got the Tippi Hedren book. I've got, and I'm still not even done. But we're you know, if you happen to read or know of a good autobiography or love reading them. We've read Sally Fields, we've read Ashley Judd's, we've read many stars. And you know, I don't think anybody can tell their own story better than the person that's writing it. So I really love that.
And I just want to kind of say from the beginning of our little meeting here, like you said, oh, I just love the stars, you know, Cary Grant and, you know, that whole world. But when you read their biographies or autobiographies, they all have pain. You know,
Oh,
it's like,
well, I don't know anybody if you read their autobiography, they don't have pain. I mean, I bet if Robert Gwaltney, I bet if Ruthie Landis, I bet every one of us would have some, because that's what life is. It's sad times and then it's times of joy. And you never really, when you only have good times, you don't appreciate them as when you have. So, and I quote Shah Rukh Khan all the time, the Indian actor. He says, if you're having a really bad day, a really bad week, he goes, the main thing you need to remember is wait for it, because it will turn. And I've been waiting for it for 2 years now with this COVID thing. But this book and film club, having this discussion with you, Ruthie, and you, Robert, you know, I sat home every Saturday night watching movies, and I was just like, I don't have anybody to talk with them. I mean, you know, usually I have my girls and, you know, they're busy with their lives. I thought I'll start this club. And even though we haven't had a whole lot of people, I think it's going to pick up. I think when you know, it's all said and done, I think people watch them afterwards. They don't necessarily, they just need to come on board to see what I'm going to wear. You know?
yes, I think so.
And I had more people email me and said, oh my God, Robert Gwaltney had on the coolest suit at our Oscar night. That suit was killer, and I love the story behind it. But I have another idea that I'm going to see if I can find an artist that can make Pulpwood Queen and Timber Guy paper dolls. Did you guys play with paper dolls?
Absolutely. Love them.
And I actually am talking to an artist who is working on maybe doing a rendition of you and me on Oscar night.
Oh, wow.
Or a t-shirt for Girlfriend Weekend next year. I was going to surprise you, but I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm working on it. I don't know if well, I'm not going to say his name yet because I don't want to jinx it, but it's going to be really cool. But I go, it would be wonderful to have Pulpwood Queen paper dolls, because you could have the Tippi Hedren.
Yeah.
You could have when I came as Lulu from, I did To Sir with Love. And I was going to say,
you did Lulu.
I did Lulu.
I love that movie.
Everybody thought I'd pick the girl with the blonde ponytails, you know, the little Cockney accent. I picked Lulu because she stole the show when she sang that theme. I hear that opening, you know, the drums when that song's getting ready to start. And to this day, it's one of my favorite iconic songs of all time for a film. And so that's why I'm really interested in watching The Birds tonight. There's no music at all.
No music.
Good point, Robert.
They turn
You
on
are
the
right.
radio, but they never listen to music. They're listening to commentary, aren't they? It's
Yeah.
been a while.
No
I
music.
just have to say though, what he did, that is so, thank you for bringing that to my attention, because I was like so aware of, you know, there was nothing that was leading you in the dialogue that, you know, behind the dialogue where the music kind of, you know, swells up, or there was nothing like that. And then the only thing was a lot of silence, or like when she's sitting on the bench and she's just
and they're
smoking
landing
cigarettes,
on the
and they're all behind her.
and she doesn't know it.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going.
And we're hearing the flapping of the wings, you know, we're hearing. So you're right, there's so much more. He tuned into so much more auditory tension than music. Wow.
So, if of all the characters, who could you relate to the most of all of them?
Oh, Suzanne Plachette.
Yeah, I kind of think I'd say Suzanne Plachette too.
I think she was my favorite character, but you guys are going to think I'm really sick. I really like the birds. The birds were so cool. How'd they get all those birds? Jungle Gym, the birds fascinated me about how they got them to do that stuff. And they, you know, when they backed out of the driveway and
they actually had a bird wrangler, actually a trainer that worked with a lot of those birds.
That's,
you know,
that's the part I was talking about when she went into that room, the attic room or something. You know, they were going to have these mechanical birds swing back and forth like they hit the, you know, that
they didn't work well.
They didn't, it wouldn't work in that space, and they couldn't get this, so they put real birds in there but they didn't.
She falls to the ground and you don't know if she's expected, and then she's catatonic,
Well, she probably really was catatonic if I got.
They would have to, they would wire their mouths, the birds' beaks shut, so they couldn't. And they did that, like the scene where the little girl is being attacked. They actually built a little platform, and they had on her shoulder. So the bird was on her shoulder, and then they wired the bird's beak so the birds couldn't get at the little girl's face. But fascinating.
Can you imagine the amount of bird poop that was in that movie?
It had to have been awful.
It had to be awful.
And you know, I kind of want to read a book about a bird wrangler, because you know, how do you teach a bird? You know, they're pretty smart. But there's a lot of them, you know, there were a lot of them. And I think my favorite character though, because I always like the offbeat ones, you know, the character actors, is that ominous woman with that weed. She looked British to me, you know.
She was the one. She's a famous British actor, and I can't remember her name, but she was in a lot of those 1930s and 40s when she was young. She's the one who said, yeah, it's the humans that is the fault.
It's kind of like the woman who played Ma Kettle. You know, she played a lot of character actresses in films. I loved her. She was my favorite. I didn't like Pa so much, but I did love, what was her name? See, this is my age. I'm starting to not remember, and I usually remember everything. So I'm counting on you, Robert, to remember.
Don't we love Google?
Google's great. So you know, that Alfred Hitchcock initially wanted the closing scene of the birds to be of the Golden Gate Bridge covered in birds.
They had gone there.
Yeah. And it would have been too expensive to have done. So they decided on the closing shot where they're coming out, which I think at the end worked beautifully.
Oh, it did, because you don't know where they're going, if they're going to somewhere safe. It was Marjorie Main. Marjorie Main.
Oh my God. And Percy.
She was in The Women.
Percy, yeah, she was in The Woman. She
That you
played,
just saw in The Women, right?
now, wasn't his name Percival, the guy who played Pa Kettle, Percy or something like that? But Marjorie Main was one of my favorites. She's kind of like, she was always like Agnes Moorehead. Agnes Moorehead was one of my favorite.
Oh
She
God.
started as an ingenue, and then she went on to be character actresses like, well, you posted the other day, Mrs. Kravitz, on somebody's post, peeking in the window,
That was Mandy.
Oh my God, that was Mandy. I'm telling you, Mrs. Kravitz was always my favorite because I don't know if you've lived. When I moved from California, I never knew my neighbors till the day I moved out. And I had two guys that were a couple that lived next door to me, and they were both postal carriers. And I met them the day I moved out. And on the other side, I met this couple, and they said, "Oh, are you moving in?" And I said, "No, I'm moving back. I'm moving back to Texas." And they said, "How long have you lived here?" And I go, "About 5 years." And they go, "Well, we have too." And I met them the day I left. It was weird. Then I go to Jefferson, and I had a Mrs. Kravitz who lived right across the street from me. Only was a guy. Every time I'd step out, he'd step out to smoke a cigarette, and he'd always just lurk over there. Finally, I walked across the street and I go, "What's your story?" He goes, and ended up, he was a super nice guy. He was a retired veteran, and he used to live in San Diego. And he said that he's just bored. And he goes, "You're just fascinating."
Of course.
I was painting my house. I had a bed and breakfast. I was painting, always doing something. And he goes, "I just, you're my entertainment." So,
Yeah.
yeah. So he was really nice. And, but it was really weird. He wasn't like Mrs. Kravitz at all once you got to know him. But Mrs. Kravitz, always looking.
She was, but you had to feel sorry for her sometimes too, because it always blew up in her face.
Yeah, and her husband was always kind of insipid and
Abner.
Yeah.
oh my God. Okay, so
This was
do you
fun.
think I should get some stitches? Do you think
I would get my, to an urgent care
maybe so.
or a little vitamin E anyway. Put a
my
little.
hands are kind of hurting, so but so next week, Ruthie, you can be on this. There's a lot of films we could watch. And I mentioned one. What was it I just mentioned? That I thought would be. Oh, we haven't watched that in a long time. What was it? Oh,
Now Voyager.
my man Godfrey.
My Man Godfrey.
Let's watch that. Oh gosh, I don't know if I can be a Fifth Avenue socialite. Well,
Of course you
Of course
can.
you can.
I will do my best. I will do my best. I'll
course
have
you
to get out my real jewels. They're all stuff. So anyway, thank you for joining us, Ruthie. Thank you for everybody who tunes in and watches the Kathy L. Murphy YouTube channel with my co-host Robert Gwaltney and Ruthie Landis. We hope you'll come. You have so much insight. We hope you'll come back every week, and we'll hope more people will come. But we're going to watch My Man Godfrey, starring
Carol Lombard.
Carol Lombard, and the actor that plays what's his name?
I just completely went blank.
Well, you'll find out next week.
I'll find out for next week.
But it's a 1936 classic tale, and I believe it's a black and white film.
I think
Yeah.
it is.
And it's William Powell who plays that.
William Powell.
William Powell. Anyway, I'm so excited about it because I haven't seen it in a long time, and it always just, and I want to watch Bringing Up Baby.
That's good.
With Katharine Hepburn, because that's a really funny, and it's got a leopard in it. So I'll have to get tiger. But see, he's even got birds. I've got them all over the mantle. I mean, I don't have seagulls, okay? So, but we get into it, and thank you all. We will put this up on our Kathy L. Murphy channel. It takes a little bit to download and upload, but once it's up, I will put it out there to the world. So thank you. Thank you for joining me. And as we say, we'll see you at the movies next week. And My Man Godfrey. So thank you very much, guys. Adios. I'm headed to urgent care. Bye.
Bye.
That's too funny.